In this video clip, I'm looking at the didactics of scales. The first thing is that you give your learners a point of reference. Tell them a scale is like your do, re, mi. They immediately know what you're talking about. And then you actually write the scale on the board that they can see how it looks when you write it out in theory. The next thing that you need to tell them is the technical names of the scale degrees. So how does it work and what do they mean? So we know it's the tonic, the supertonic, the median, the subdominant, the dominant, submedian, leading tone, and then tonic again. But what does it mean? How does it work? So this is how you're going to teach that to your kids. So at the bottom here, you can see I wrote C major, and for the moment, just focus on this section over here. So the tonic is the most important scale degree. Then the second most important one is your dominant. After that, you have your subdominant. So your subdominant is just under the dominant. So if you think of the prefix sub, it means under, like subway. Now, although this is an easy way to teach them that, that's not really what it actually means. The subdominant actually refers to the dominant below the tonic, or rather the interval of a fifth, that note you get there below the tonic. So your dominant is your fifth scale degree. And then if you go to the other side, a fifth below your tonic is the subdominant. So it's the dominant below the tonic, subdominant. And make your kids aware of the beautiful symmetry here. So you have your tonic, and then to the one side you have your dominant, a fifth higher, and then to the other side, a fifth lower, you get your subdominant. Then the next note that you're going to introduce is your median. Now the median is in the middle between your tonic and your dominant. Also, in terms of your triad, it is the middle note. Then the submedian, again, like the subdominant, is the median that you get a third below your tonic. So your median is the third note after your tonic, and to the other side, the third note below your tonic is your submedian. Then the last one, of course, is your leading tone. Why? Because the leading tone leads to the tonic. Now I'm going to quickly share with you guys the basics of teaching the various scales. And I'm going to share my screen with you. Now the following table comes from my grade 12 book. And here I just quickly revise the various scales that is requested for grade 12 CAPS. Now, the major scale, I'm not going to look at too much detail. You know how it looks. And we have our semitones between the third and the fourth, and the seventh and the eighth scale degree. Now, let's have a look at our minors. So always when you teach minors, start with a natural minor. It's also known as the Aeolian mode. So it's natural because we didn't make any changes to it. There aren't any accidentals like the raised leading tone. And there you can see that I wrote it ascending and descending. G minor, of course, the relative major is B flat major. Then the harmonic minor, I also think you guys are fine with teaching to your kids. The important aspect there is that you indicate the raised leading tone. And when you teach this, just remember it's the raised leading tone. It's not a sharpened leading tone. Because if you're going to say sharpen, they're going to think you literally need to sharpen it. And although this might be true for some leading tones, it will not be true in all instances. And then because the scale looks exactly the same in the ascending and descending version, your semitones will be in the same places. Then the melodic minor is the one that sometimes creates some confusion among the learners. So what you need to tell them there is, again, you start with the natural minor, write out all those scale degrees. Then when it gets to the 6th and 7th scale degree in the ascending scale, you are going to raise it, meaning you make them higher by a semitone. So in this specific example, and I chose this example so that you can see that it doesn't necessarily mean that you sharpen, both the 6th and the 7th scale degree. So G minor again, our 6th scale degree is an E flat, so we need to restore that. We raise it so it becomes E natural. And then in terms of the leading tone, it was F. So if we raise it by a semitone, it becomes F sharp. Now in the descending scale, you have to teach them, you restore the 7th and the 6th scale degree to the natural form. That means the F sharp returns to being F natural, and the E natural restores to E flat. Very important that you use the correct terminology there. So I talked about restore, not flatten or lower, because if they're only going to write the descending scale, if they write out the natural minor and you taught them you have to lower the 6th and the 7th scale degree, they're going to put flats there. Okay, so we just restore it to the natural form. And because our ascending and descending scale is different, obviously our semitones are going to be different. Good. Then the next one that you look at is your pentatonic scale. The pentatonic scale means there are 5 notes in the scale, and we just disregard the top note. So then there are your 5 notes. Now the traditional way of writing a pentatonic scale is to omit the 4th and the 7th scale degree, which is exactly what I did in this example. You can make your learners aware of the fact that you can omit any scales, any 2 scale degrees, except of course your tonic. Then when it gets to the blues scale, the easiest way to teach the blues scale, and again, there are various forms of the blues scale. This is just the traditional blues scale. So you write the notes of your major, but when you do so, you omit the 2nd and the 6th scale degree. Then you add a flattened 3rd, 5th, and 7th scale degree. Now you'll see I used the word flattened there. I would prefer using the word lowered, because again, if flattened, you immediately think of to put a flat in front of the note, and it doesn't necessarily mean that. So the real context is actually to lower it with a semitone. However, I use this term because this is the term that is used in jazz and in your contemporary music. But again, just make your learners aware of it. It's a question of lowering that note. So here you can see that I've added the lower 3rd, 5th, and 7th scale degree. I put the original notes in brackets because a combination between the original notes and the flattened notes can be used in a blues composition. Then lastly, something that you should be aware of, and this is something that our classical musicians might wonder about or find strange, is that the lowered 5th scale degree can also be replaced and interchangeably used with the sharpened or the raised 4th scale degree. So in the same piece, you will sometimes have F sharp, and then when you have the next one, it's going to be a G flat. Okay, And then you have your symmetrical scale. So that's where your adjacent notes are exactly um, um, the same distance apart. So the first one that we're looking at is your whole tone scale. So very easy. You pick your note, say it's the whole tone scale on C, and then you just start writing in whole tones from there. When you reach the E to the F sharp, you're going to stick to either using sharps or flats for the rest of the scale. So here you can see I decided to use sharps. So I've got F sharp, G sharp, and A sharp. I could also have used G flat, A flat, and B flat, just as long as you're consistent and stick either with flats or with sharps. Then when it gets to the chromatic scale, very simple to teach. All your learners need to do is they write out the notes of the major scale, but they write the tonic, the dominant, and the final tonic, the upper tonic, only once, and then all the other scale degrees twice. So here you can see that's exactly what I did. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 written once, 6, 7, and 8. All they have to do now is, and now remember, chromatic scale, semitones apart. They just look at the piano and they fill in the accidental. So after D, I'm going to first have E flat, followed by E, meaning I need to indicate the natural. Then I have F, F sharp. Yeah, it's fine to use a combination between sharps and flats, and you will know which one to use if you just think of the various scale degrees, look at your piano and make sure that the notes are semitones apart. F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. Then I go to B flat, and then I have B. So learners might sometimes say, but they don't know which one to use first, or you're going to see that they swap the two around in their tests. So emphasize the fact that they just need to think chromatically in terms of the scale. So does my E flat or the E natural come first? It's the E flat. Does the G or the G sharp comes first? It is the G. And then they should be fine. Then I'm just going to focus on a couple of general aspects when you teach scales. And the first thing is always build on previous knowledge. And I always, with all the grades, quickly revise the scales that's been discussed in the previous grade, because then you know they've got a solid foundation. Then when it gets to writing the scale, the first thing that you need to make the learners aware of, there's a lot of detail when it gets to the instruction. Right, G major, ascending, in the treble clef, in quadruple time without key signature. That's a lot of information. So tell them to highlight or underline the important terms. Then when they write the scale, the first thing that they need to do is to write the clef. Maybe it's already given, I don't know, but the first thing is the clef. Then the key signature, then the time signature, and then the double bar line. So if it's with key signature, yes, you're going to have a key signature. If they ask for a time signature, you're going to insert it. Okay, so it just depends on the question. Then, of course, you also need to tell them what's the difference between with and without key signature. With key signature, all the sharps or flats at the beginning. Without, they're not at the beginning, but as accidentals in front of the various notes. Then, when it gets to, so you've done this now. So they wrote the clef, they have indicated the key signature, the time signature, the double bar line, and now they're going to write out the notes. Now, if we just look at this top example again, you can see all the notes are written out and evenly spaced across my staff. Then suggest to them that they number the various notes. It's a very good way to check if they may be omitted or doubled some of the notes. A very good way to also test that you write accurately is as you write it, is say in your head C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Then the next step is, just about the numbering. So the numbering is not compulsory, but it's just a way to check yourself and to also spot your semitones easily. So I don't really need to put much thought into it. So my semitones are between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8 for C major. Then the next thing that you are going to do is if the instruction says write it in simple quadruple time, you are just going to change the notes into a particular rhythm, and of course the grouping of these notes should be correct. If this is required, I suggest that your learners just stick to using simple note values like minims, crotchets, quavers, maybe one dotted note somewhere in the scale. Then if the scale is written descending, you have to make your learners aware of the fact that when they number the notes, that it goes from 8 to 1. Then also, if there was an ascending and descending scale, which is very seldom the case, that they apply the accidentals if it's written without key signature to both the ascending and the descending scale degree. Also in this case, the top note, so if you go ascending and then descending, the top note is only written once. Then the last thing is just that you emphasize the fact that they spread it evenly across the staff. I have mentioned this, but just to make sure that they're not going to bundle the notes all at the beginning of their staff. And that is the didactics of teaching scales.